That's what I've been naming the work that I do. One of its main contributions to epistemology and practice I have called the Mattering Map. Today I want to talk to you about the Mattering Map and its application to clinical practice. But first I want to locate myself and feminism for you on my personal map and the map of the American culture. Feminism was a perspective that in my early years was considered too radical. As they do today, the media defined who we were for the larger society, who learned about us from their favorite male newscasters. Because all the newscasters were male, and were in different measure horrified by us. It made a good story, like some of the stories that you see on the news now. One of the best chapters of the story was when feminists burned their bras. It made news and has since become legend. Once I asked, often in groups, I won't do it here, I ask how many people remember this incident or have seen it on television. But in any audience, several people say that they do. Either they remember reading about it or seeing it on television. I won't embarrass you and have you raise your hands, but I will tell you it never happened. You never saw it on television or read it because it never happened. And it just is an example of the power of the media to create something, which we're still seeing today. Now feminism is considered by most people, especially those who are not practiced at noticing what's going on around them or inside them, to have accomplished its goals and now to be old-fashioned and irrelevant. My students call it 70s feminism and tell me stories about their grandmothers who were feminists in the long ago 70s. Even now, some of you may be doing what I like to call rolling your inner eyes. Colleague of mine did, you know. What that means is that internally you're like, oh no, feminism, and externally you're keeping your eyes straight ahead and polite. So don't roll your eyes, I'll explain to you more. I hope to change those eyes from rolling to wide open, with wonder at the sights that they can see. I hope to change them to beginner's eyes, as the Buddhists might say, or to child's eyes, to traveler's eyes. Isn't that the lure of travel, to see everything as if it is new? And intellectually, feminism is often said to be too narrow, only about women after all. This too is a misconception. Feminism in psychology, epistemology, and clinical practice is a lens, an approach, and a set of ideas that began historically and socially with the discovery and analysis of gender, hidden in plain sight and hidden in psychology's theories and practices. And gender did lead us first to the issues of women of various races and ethnicities, which had life and death urgency, and only some time later to those of men and masculinity. At the beginning of what is now called second wave feminism, I was just a girl. I mean that in both senses of the phrase. I was just a girl, and I was just a girl. Am I doing something to this computer?
If you're not going to use it, Michael's closing.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I could not for a long time get into graduate school for that reason, and for that reason alone. No girls were allowed. No girls in the clubhouse. And the chair of the program that I had been at originally just told me that straight out. We don't get females. And not a good investment. And some of us finally did gain entry as a result of legislation rather than invitation. We soon found that no girls were allowed in the theories and practices of our particular disciplines. They were all about boys and men, as if girls and women were a subset. Some of you remember that. In psychology, we found Freud and penis envy, castration anxiety, schizophrenogenic mothers, refrigerator mothers. Does anybody remember hearing these phrases?
Yeah.
Okay. Refrigerator mothers were supposedly the cause of autism. At the other extreme was Skinner and reductionism, which denied the existence of the mind, found irrelevant the role of the brain, and claimed objectivity for itself alone. I cannot say it any better than that great American student of epistemology, Woody Allen. Objectivity is subjective. Empiricism is a perspective. and a methodology, and that's all it is. We found the field divided, fragmented. We found disciplines, clinical or experimental, social psychology or personality theory, and between disciplines, psychology or sociology, social science or hard science, academic or practitioner, objectivity or subjectivity. All those false choices, all those disciplines falsely divided from each other, each growing discipline looked for its own answers. These debates continue, which is more important, thoughts or feeling, emoting or changing behavior, meditating or acting, some of the questions of our field. Entire disciplines build themselves on the shaky foundation of one or the other of these narrow choices. This or that. If you use only one oar in a rowboat, your boat will only go in circles. I maintain that this is equally so about the oars of dichotomous thought. Those of us who were missing from the theories were shocked and dismayed and watched our previous version of reality deconstruct before our amazed eyes. Built on faulty foundations, they easily crumbled as we began to ask the question of a child's puzzle. What is missing from this picture? You've all seen those children's puzzles where you look for there's no branch on the tree or the elephant kind of thing. That was our first question. What's missing from this picture? It turned out to be us. It turned out to be gender. It turned out to be ethnicity. When I entered the field, there was no gender. And I'll talk to you about that, but I mean that literally. There was no ethnicity. There was no homosexuality. There was homosexuality, excuse me. It was a serious disease and we thought it might be contagious. The truth about gender is that it did not exist before we named it. I mean this somewhat literally. Gender existed only as a grammatical convention in the Romance languages and other languages foreign to us. La tabla, la mesa. So this is where we got the idea of gender from. This is how it came into psychology as strongly as it is now. So if you had said gender to somebody in those days, they would have said, what language are you talking about? So we don't particularly use gender in English. And that's how gender started. Nowadays, when I go around and say that I do work in gender, and I said this to a Stanford student a couple of weeks ago, she said back to me, oh yes, we do that surgery here. So this is the idea about how the concept has morphed. This is one of the things that I'm talking about, the concept's morphed. It was la mesa, now it's gone from that to that. It's hard to imagine psychology or any field without gender as part of it. It's hard to imagine doing psychotherapy without gender as part of it. It seems so obvious now, but that's what we found. And so the more we looked, the more we saw. The map keeps moving toward greater complexity. There followed a deconstruction boom that still goes on today, as you all know since you're part of it. But I want you to stay with me now for a minute as I lead you out of this urban construction boom to a larger metaphor. Not as a replacement, but one large enough to encompass the others and offer an integration of separated fields. And that is the mattering map. Both of these simple words contain whole universes of meaning, so I want to open up these worlds for you to enter. Let's begin with mapping. Maps originally included the footprints of the traveler and depictions of events along the way. I don't know if any of you have seen the older maps. And where there are monsters and dangers on the road, that's how they originally did mapping. There was much works of art as science and designed to guide the traveler through dangers, monsters, and everything else that the intrepid adventurer might encounter along the way. There was much psychological as there were geographical. Context moves with the traveler in a way, or perhaps better said, the traveler is always in multiple contexts of safety and danger. Context is an important aspect of this kind of mapping. Let me offer an example of a place where this kind of mapping still exists. In Costa Rica today, where I've lived for many years, no one can read maps, although they're reasonably oriented in space and time. This makes it extremely difficult for first world tourists as they depend on a two-dimensional, flattened, and decontextualized representation. If you show such a piece of paper to a Costa Rican, they would probably shake their head and not understand. They would offer you more useful instructions, such as continue on until you come to the really pretty house. Turn left there and turn right again at the tree that was in front of the pharmacy that burned down in 1948. In this tradition, and one of the things about giving instructions that way is that you have to know the history and geography of the place. You have to, it reminds you that you're in context, which our maps do not remind. If you don't know where the pharmacy burnt down, or if you have a different opinion about which house is pretty, you can't get there from here. In this tradition, we might have been told in 1970, had anyone known enough to warn us, go straight until you come to gender, which you cannot see at all. So it will trip you up for a long time. The second strongest influence, and I've been around in a lot of the fields, but I just want to mention one other thing that has had a strong influence on me, and that's Buddhism. And one of the things I learned from Buddhism is that nothing is static or what it appears to be, that there is nothing but change. The rest is constructed by the human mind.